I've been playing drums since I was 8 years old. My parents noticed how I would always tap rhythms on everything: dinner table, school books, even my own legs. So they finally got me my first drum kit. It wasn't anything fancy, just a basic starter set, but I loved it more than anything. When I started high school, joining the marching band was a no-brainer. Our school's marching band was legendary in the district, with over 130 members. Being part of something so massive was incredible. It was during our first home game of the season when everything went down. The energy was electric that night. We were playing against our biggest rivals, and the stands were packed. Our band was doing what we do best, keeping the crowd hyped between plays with our fight songs and popular hits. I was positioned in the front row of the band section with my snare drum right next to the railing. We had just finished playing a certain energetic rendition of Seven Nation Army when this woman suddenly appeared in front of me, dragging a crying kid who looked about 6 or 7 years old. I politely asked if I could help her with anything. Her face was already red, and she had that look that every service worker dreads. She demanded that we tell our friends to play quieter because it was hurting her child's ears. I explained to her that we were a marching band, and playing loudly was how we expressed ourselves, suggesting that if she didn't like the noise, she should probably leave. Her eyes went wide like I had just suggested she should eat her own shoe. She then started shouting that if we didn't play quieter, she would call the police and file a noise complaint. I wasn't paid enough for this. Actually, I wasn't paid at all, so I decided to pass this problem up the chain. I suggested she speak with our band director instead. She yanked her crying child down the stands toward where our band director was standing. Even over the crowd noise, I could hear her shrieking at him about how we were ruining her child's experience and demanding he make us play softer. Our band director, who had been doing this job for over 20 years, kept his cool and basically told her the same thing I did. That's when things got wild. This woman actually tried to grab my drumsticks right out of my hands. I had to pull them away and hold them behind my back while she made wild grabbing motions. Her kid was just standing there crying even harder now, probably more embarrassed than anything else. But it got even better. When it was time for us to head down to the field for our halftime show, this woman planted herself right in the middle of the stairs, trying to block our entire band from leaving the stands. It took 3 other parents and a school security guard to convince her to move. We did our halftime show anyway, and it was one of our best performances yet. Maybe it was the adrenaline from the whole situation, but everyone was totally in sync. The crowd loved it, well, except for Karen and her kid, who I could hear wailing all the way from the field. Just as we were getting back to our seats, 2 police officers showed up. Karen immediately ran up to them, probably thinking she had won. She started demanding that they take action, insisting she wanted to file a noise complaint against the band, claiming we were deliberately trying to hurt children's ears. The officer calmly explained to her that this was a marching band, and marching bands were supposed to be loud. He warned her that if she didn't back down, she would be arrested for disturbing the peace. All the color drained away, and her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She looked around at all the people staring at her, grabbed her still crying kid, and started walking away. But the cop wasn't done. The officer asked her to wait, explaining they needed to document the incident. He then turned to our band director and asked if he wanted to press charges for harassment and attempting to interfere with a school activity. Our band director, who usually was the most easygoing person, didn't hesitate for a second before agreeing. Karen started crying then, begging and pleading, saying she was just trying to protect her child. But it was too late. The cops took her information, and she ended up getting slapped with a $2,000 fine and was banned from attending any future school events without prior administrative approval. I later found out from one of the football players that Karen and her family had season tickets, right next to the band section. After that night, they had to sit all the way on the other side of the stadium where all the visiting team's fans sat. Every time I saw them during subsequent games, Karen would glare at us, but she never came near the band again. I still remember that Friday afternoon like it was yesterday. I was 16, fresh license in hand, cruising down Main Street with my two best friends. You know how it is when you're a teenager? Everything feels like an adventure, even just driving around town. We were having the time of our lives when I spotted this group of guys in a parking lot. Typical teenage scene. Fancy cars with their hoods up, motorcycles lined up, music blasting. Half of them had their shirts off, showing off like peacocks. I excitedly yelled for my friend to look at the scene. My friend was driving and, well, we both made a stupid mistake. I shouldn't have yelled and she shouldn't have turned to look. Before we knew it, crash. We rear-ended the car in front of us. It wasn't bad, maybe 15 miles per hour tops. We did everything right. My friends called their parents, and I called the police. I went to check on the other car's occupants, but the passenger jumped out like I was carrying the plague. She screamed at me to stay back and not come near them before running to a nearby payphone. Meanwhile, I checked on the driver. The driver was leaning back in her seat, acting strange, mumbling that she couldn't feel her arms. My heart dropped. I immediately told the dispatcher to send an ambulance. I was freaking out, thinking we'd just paralyzed someone. I nervously asked if there was anything I could do to help or make her more comfortable. That's when things got weird. She demanded to know who had hit her and which one of us was driving. I tried to calm her down, telling her not to worry about that and that the ambulance was coming. But she wouldn't let it go. She started screaming, demanding to know who was driving. When I refused to tell her, saying she was acting crazy, the dispatcher warned me to back away from the car. Thank God I listened because this woman, who supposedly couldn't feel her arms, took a swing at my head. She ripped off her seatbelt and came charging after me like a bull. We did this ridiculous dance around her car, me running one way, her the other. I finally broke away toward the parking lot. My friend was banging on the fast food restaurant's door, but they wouldn't let us in. My other friend was on the phone crying while this woman chased me like a Terminator. She caught up to my friend who was on the phone, knocked her down, and then chased my other friend through the drive-thru. When the emergency services arrived, this woman came flying around the corner, saw them, and dropped to the ground like a sack of potatoes. She started having a seizure right there in front of everyone. Her passenger friend started making a scene, screaming for someone to help and demanding that we be arrested, claiming we had done this to her friend. She tried to sue us all, claimed we dragged her out of the car and chased her. The 911 recording and security cameras proved she was lying. Then our lawyer caught her at a music festival, dancing away while supposedly suffering from severe injuries. She got a year in jail for insurance fraud. But wait, there's more. After she got out, we started finding dead animals everywhere. Our porches, mailboxes, even in a swimming pool. The harassment calls started, and she followed my friends around town. One night, she threw a dead squirrel through my friend's window. But her mom had bought a guard dog, and that dog caught her red-handed. The police found her car down the street loaded with meth, stolen credit cards, and what looked like a kidnapping kit. She got 5 years but served 3. She had money but refused to pay us what she owed. So the court started taking it from her tax returns and giving it to us on debit cards. Just got my final payment yesterday. All this happened because we bumped her car at 15 miles per hour. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we just kept our eyes on the road instead of looking at those shirtless guys. About a year after I moved into my new house, I was living a peaceful life with my dog, keeping to myself and trying to be a good neighbor. Everything was fine until this guy moved onto our street with his dog. At first, I didn't think much of it. Live and let live, right? That was until I noticed the old lady across the street putting up these handmade signs in her yard that said, "Please don't let your dog poo in my yard." One day, while cleaning up after my dog in our designated spot, I had this perfect patch of grass on the other side of my driveway. I found this massive pile that definitely seemed bigger than what my dog usually left. I brushed it off, thinking maybe I'd been too generous with the treats lately, but then it happened again. This time the evidence was unmistakable. There were corn kernels in it. My dog doesn't eat corn. That's when it clicked. Maybe the old lady wasn't so crazy after all. I started paying more attention to what was happening in the neighborhood, and one day, while doing dishes, I caught the culprit red-handed. This guy's dog came running into my backyard unleashed while my dog was going nuts barking inside. Before I could even dry my hands, this dog was squatting in my yard, and there was the owner just standing at the end of my driveway watching. I yelled out to him, demanding to know if he realized his dog was pooping in my yard. He just casually replied that yes, he knew. When I told him he needed to clean it up immediately, he had the nerve to pat his pockets and claim he didn't have anything to put it in. I asked him why he hadn't brought a baggie like any normal, courteous person would. Instead of apologizing, he actually had the audacity to ask if I had a bag he could use. I refused and told him he'd have to go home, get his own bag, and come back to clean it up while I waited. To my surprise, he actually did what I asked. He went home, got a bag, and cleaned up his dog's mess. A few months later, I noticed the old lady's signs were back up again. The final straw came during Memorial Day weekend. I had my brother, his wife, and their 2 young kids over for a cookout. The kids were playing in the backyard when my 4-year-old niece came running up to her dad. The smell hit us before we even saw it. They had been playing in dog poop, with corn in it. My sister-in-law was livid. She demanded to know why I would let the kids play in an area where my dog goes to the bathroom. I tried to explain that we had a designated area and this wasn't from my dog, but the damage was already done. That's when I decided enough was enough. I spent the entire summer collecting every single pile of dog poop I found in my yard in a bucket with a lid. I left it out in the sun to reach maximum ripeness. 3.5 months of scorching summer heat did wonders for my collection. One beautiful night, just as fall was approaching, I had a few drinks by my fire pit. Around 3 a.m., slightly drunk and feeling vengeful, I took my bucket of 3 months' worth of dog poop and walked down to his house. I stood there for a moment, imagining his face the next morning, then ripped off the lid and flung every single piece across his front yard. It was glorious. The next afternoon, I drove by his house. He had actually hired a cleanup crew to deal with it. When he saw me drive by, he glared, but I just smiled and waved. He knew exactly why it happened, but what was he going to do? Report that someone threw dog poop in his yard after months of letting his dog use everyone else's yard as a toilet? I heard that he actually got rid of his dog a few weeks later. Apparently, he couldn't handle the responsibility of picking up after it. The old lady took down her signs. In peace, returned to our street. I've been dealing with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease for the past 10 years, ever since my exposure to toxic chemicals at my former workplace. The company eventually settled with me, which helped cover my medical expenses, but living with COPD means I need supplemental oxygen pretty much 24/7. This summer, I finally decided to treat myself to that beach vacation I'd been dreaming about. My doctor gave me the green light, helped me plan everything regarding my oxygen needs, and I made sure to book a beachfront hotel room to minimize the walking distance. I even called ahead to confirm they could accommodate my oxygen tank deliveries. The first 2 days were absolute heaven. The sound of waves, the gentle breeze, and the peace I felt sitting under my rented umbrella were exactly what I needed. But on the 3rd day, everything went sideways. I was settled in my usual spot, oxygen concentrator humming quietly beside me, when this family of 4 decided to set up their camp right next to mine. There was plenty of space on the beach, but they chose to park themselves barely 10 feet away. It took less than 5 minutes for the complaints to start. Karen turned to her husband and asked if he could hear the annoying buzzing sound. Her husband agreed, pointing out that it was coming from the machine next to me. Then Karen raised her voice and called out to me, complaining that my machine was disrupting their peace and quiet. I apologetically explained that it was my oxygen concentrator and that I needed it to breathe. Karen responded by asking if I could turn it off for a while, claiming they were trying to take family photos and the noise would ruin everything. When I told her that I couldn't do that because I needed it to breathe, her husband jumped in. He suggested, ridiculously, that I could surely hold my breath for a few minutes, adding that they had paid good money to be there. I pointed out that I had also paid to be there, and emphasized that I literally couldn't turn it off unless they wanted me to stop breathing. Karen then accused me of being ridiculous, saying their kids were trying to enjoy their vacation. She demanded that I move somewhere else since it was a public beach. I had to remind her that not only was I there first, but this was medical equipment I needed to stay alive. The kids meanwhile were running around and screaming at top volume, making way more noise than my concentrator ever could. The irony was completely lost on their parents. Karen then pulled out her phone and announced she was calling the authorities, claiming my equipment was clearly a hazard to have on a public beach. When I told her to go ahead, she actually called the Coast Guard. I could hear her dramatic performance as she told them about a man with a suspicious device making weird noises. She expressed concern for her children's safety and complained about my refusal to turn it off. When they asked her to describe the device, she fumbled, just calling it some kind of machine with tubes. While we waited for the authorities, things got even more bizarre. The husband started taking photos of me and my concentrator, threatening to report me to the beach authorities. Their kids began throwing sand in my direction, encouraged by their mother who kept insisting I was ruining their vacation. Then came the moment that crossed the line. The husband decided to take matters into his own hands and actually tried to grab my oxygen concentrator. I shouted for help, terrified he would disconnect my oxygen supply. Several nearby beachgoers immediately rushed over. A lifeguard who had been watching the situation called the police, and two off-duty nurses who happened to be nearby came to make sure I was okay. When the police arrived, along with a very annoyed Coast Guard officer, the entitled couple tried to paint themselves as victims, but there were too many witnesses. The cherry on top was that someone had recorded the whole thing on their phone, including the husband's attempt to grab my concentrator. The couple was arrested for attempted assault and interfering with medical equipment. Turns out trying to separate someone from their life support equipment is taken pretty seriously by law enforcement. The Coast Guard officer gave them an extra tongue lashing about wasting emergency services time. The beach resort management, mortified by the whole incident, upgraded me to a premium suite for the remainder of my stay. They also gave me a private spot on their VIP beach section, complete with a security guard who checked on me regularly. I ended up extending my vacation by a few days. The entitled family's bail hearing was scheduled during that time, and I made sure to attend. Watching them try to explain to the judge why they thought it was okay to demand someone stop breathing for their beach photos was worth the extra days.